Welcome. Thank you all for being here. It's the first session on a Monday. We appreciate that. I'm Prashant Agrawal. I'm CEO and founder of Impact Analytics. We are an AI supply chain and merchandising platform. I'm very pleased to have with me Chris Norris, retail director and group head of Al-Futtaim, based in Dubai. We're going to be talking about AI-powered pricing and inventory as a new margin engine. It's a topic that I think is of huge importance for all of us. Just before Chris and I discuss it, I'm actually also a professor at Columbia Business School where I teach AI and retail. I'm going to take about 7 to 8 minutes here and go through some trends that I think that we're seeing. The first one is these three represent three tectonic shifts in the world today. Do people know who these gentlemen are? Anyone want to take a guess? We're going to try to make this as interactive and fun as possible. Anybody guess any of them? Comedians, that's right, they're comedians. Name them. Nate Bargatze, right? Nate Bargatze is the highest paid comedian in the world today. He earned $200 million last year. These are three comedians, and I think comedians actually have a good insight into where the world is going. Jim Gaffigan, if you've seen him before, is actually a portly fellow. Jim Gaffigan is not a portly fellow today. He's thin. He is on GLP-1, and his new new comedy special was called something, now I'm going to forget the name, but like Becoming Skinny. One, GLP-1, tectonic shift for us in inventory and pricing. Two, Jimmy Yang, right? What has he said? He said, Gucci is the new Temu. Why? Supply chains around the world are shifting. President Trump in April of last year, announced tariffs that have affected supply chains. And one of the things that he said is that, look, the Chinese are going to upskill. They're going to move from Temu being the down market thing to saying Gucci is the new Temu, right? They're going to upskill. Supply chains are volatile. The tariffs are affecting everything around the world. Companies are changing. Supply chains are changing. So one, you've got GLP-1 going on. Two, you've got supply chain shifts going on. And then number three, Nate Bargatze, and that's a nice picture of him just smiling like that, is in his mid-40s, late 40s now. And he talks about how he was with his intern in Australia, and his intern told him there is a new technology that he's never seen before. So Nate said, wow, what's that new technology? He said, it's a wake-up call. Now, I don't know if people know, but nobody uses a wake-up call anymore, right? You all have a phone that you use as a wake-up call. His intern had never heard of a wake-up call, which is what we used to use when we started our career in the 90s and noughts to actually wake up in a hotel, right? You ask the front desk to wake you up, and that's what he used. Now, his early 20s intern was saying, wow, this is a new technology. The reason I mention that is that all of us that are, I see some younger people, but are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, the new generation is embracing technology, right? Even an old technology seems new, but they want to use it. Agentic AI, that shift is going to transform everything. So if you look at the first tectonic shift, this is GLP-1. This is GLP-1 usage, and you can actually see how it's growing up, right? So if you look at the number of people and the number of actually weight loss drugs, they're increasing at a rate that we've never seen before, right? They've been around for 20 years, but they've taken off in the last 3 years in terms of people using them. In the US specifically, we've seen a huge uptick around this. The interesting thing here is there's also off-label usage of GLP-1 drugs. So the number of people using it is probably underprescribed because there are literally off-market pharmacists that will give you GLP-1 drugs at a lower price, as long as you're willing to take that risk. The second thing that's happening with GLP-1 is that you're actually seeing, and Chris runs a huge portion of the food business as well for Al-Futtaim, the US actually, the average American used to consume 2,400 calories in 1964. In 2024, the average American consumed, I think that says 3,600 calories. Americans did not increase their height by 50%. we increased our waste by 50%. That was just what happened in this country. Obesity is a huge problem. The challenge with that and GLP-1 is that we've actually in the US experienced food or calorie consumption growth for the last 50 years. For the first time in 2024, 2025, we actually saw calorie consumption come down. The CEO of Walmart talked about how grocery units actually was steady. Population growth actually means grocery units should go up, but actually you're seeing consumption of food happening less. That's a tectonic shift that's happening in grocery right now, both in terms of the number of units being consumed and what is being consumed. We all know the protein craze that is happening right now. What this has led to for us in fashion, those of you that are fashion retailers, are that the size curves are shifting. Size curves are shifting. They're moving from the right to the left. So you're going from double XL to medium. You're going from XL to small. People are shifting their size curves, and it's happening at a rate of 1 to 2% a year, but it's happening quite dramatically. We actually looked at this data for New York City in 2024 and saw that happening in New York City, where you actually saw size curve shift on the Upper East Side, Midtown, and then in 2025, we redid that study for the United States, and we saw that size curves continue to shift. The interesting thing here is secondhand retailers in 2025 reported that they were seeing excess double XL, XL stock come to them. So we're actually seeing that happen in the secondhand market. People are losing weight and giving their stuff away. And getting that size curve right is very important for inventory. A 3% shift in size curve means a lot for people. If you look at this, if you get this wrong, your whole margins can go away in fashion. This 3% shift will not happen in 1 year, but will probably happen over the course of the next 3 to 4 years for almost all retailers, where you will see size curves shift over here. You can see the total impact, the drop in margin by 540 basis points. If you are a fashion retailer, that's a huge drop, right, for your gross margins over there. I'm going to flip to us just for a second so that people that don't know who we are Impact Analytics. I'm the CEO of this company. I think we're the leader in AI for supply chain and merchandising. We're 1,000 people strong. We are a mix of 3 different types of people that are ex-consultants. I was at McKinsey and BCG for most of my career. We are data scientists and data engineers. And the last piece is, and I think the most important, we have more than 50 ex-merchants with us, 50 ex-retailers that help us actually implement our software. This is a sample of our clients right here. We are actually working across the globe with people on inventory and pricing. We've got a bunch of wonderful awards. I won't spend too much time here. I just take 2 seconds here to make sure that everyone understands what we do. We have our SaaS platform, which is incredibly important for us. That's the bulk of what we do, but we also, because we've gotten very good at data, offer data engineering, and then the other piece that we're pushing on is agentic AI, which we've been doing for the last 2 years, really, where we have 4 deployed engineers. It's an end-to-end platform. We're going to talk about inventory and pricing, but we start with Plan Smart, then move to Assort Smart, Item Smart, Size Smart, wait for it, Inventory Smart. We didn't actually have anybody in marketing until a couple of years ago, so we made everything very smart. That's just a very simple way of getting our products out there. Move over, keep going here, and get to... So one of the other pieces that I'll say is that, look, the basis of what we do as a company, and we've been doing this now for 10 years, people say, oh, we want AI, we want ML. It takes time, it takes effort. We've been developing our models for that long. We now have more than 2 million AI and ML models running on each store SKU combination to give the most accurate forecast that's out there. What we have actually done on inventory is rare. So over the last 3 years, we've actually deployed an allocation and replenishment system for Coach, Kate Spade, Levi's, Ralph Lauren across the world, helping them unify their processes and people around one system. So this is where I'm going to stop for a minute. I think one of the things that's out there is inventory is a challenge. Pricing is a challenge. How do you get these systems in? There is a certain way that we have been doing things in retail for the last 30 years. Frankly, there's a large company out there, a couple of large companies. They developed great technology in the 90s and noughts. That's what we've all grown up with. That technology is now a bit dated. So how do we get people that are used to doing something a certain way to change and adopt? It's one thing to say, I want machine learning. It's one thing to say, I want AI. It's another thing to actually go do it. It's another thing to actually go do it. And with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Chris to introduce himself, and then maybe that'll be our first question.
Yes, thank you, Prashant. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I'll just introduce myself quickly. I should say before that I do that it's interesting you talk about the Manjaro experience, because I am one of those folks who's benefited from it. And I'm going to stay sitting down because it is a bit of a problem with sizing of clothing. And I haven't been wearing a suit for a while. I haven't been to a convention. So if I stand up, there's a risk my trousers might fall down. So I'm going to stay sitting down, right? So my name is Chris Norris. I'm the retail IT director for a company called Al-Futtaim. We're headquartered in Dubai in the Middle East in the United Arab Emirates. You talk about, Prashant, us having grown up in the retail industry with 2, 3, 4 monolithic providers, and I'm very much that man. My career very much in the UK, working with Sainsbury's. I was the retail director at British Airways for many years for in-flight retail. John Lewis, and also with systems integrators like Accenture. I moved to the Middle East about 9 years ago. Very privileged to work for one of the largest family conglomerates in the Middle East. It's a fascinating market. It's changed dramatically, and we'll come on to that in terms of the dynamics of pricing in particular. But the conglomerate nature of those businesses, for those who aren't familiar, are typically family-run businesses who have fingers in many, many pies, and Al-Futtaim is no different. In fact, it's almost easier to say what we aren't involved in rather than those that we are. So, but we have automotive business, we have a retail business, we have healthcare, we have insurance, we have education, and so on. From a retail perspective, just to give you a sense of the scale, so we operate in 14 different countries around the world, focusing very much on the GCC, and also in Asia. And we're very lucky to be the franchise owner for a number of really serious, great brands. So we have Marks & Spencer's. Those of you from the UK will know that extremely well, I'm sure, as a clothing and food provider. We have Ace Hardware, probably more familiar to many of you. Toys R Us, the Inditex brands, other fashion brands, including Ted Baker, Sandro, Madge, and also IKEA. So it's a very interesting portfolio, and I'm sure those of you on the technology side can appreciate that that's quite an interesting challenge from us as a technology leader, because we're not a one-size-fits-all. It's not just about putting in one solution and then letting it run. And also our relationship with the franchisees is very different. Some of them run a push model, some of them run a pull model, some of them give us availability of stock that we can choose, some of them actually just determine the kind of product availability that and selections that we have. So I'm sure you can appreciate that creates quite a number of dynamics. And I know, Prashant, I think we're going to talk a little bit about that, you know, what that drives in terms of the capabilities of the merchandising and the buying team in particular, and how that's driven a really seismic change in the way that, you know, AI is changing those roles. And I think that's a critical thing for all of us. You know, I'm sure we're all aware of it. I approach all of this from a change management perspective. Technology is purely an enabler. It's the change management, how we actually deploy stuff to our store associates and also to our buyers to make sure that they use it and it drives the sales that we need. You know, I can put a great solution in, but if it's not adopted properly, then actually I might as well not have bothered. And I think we'll touch on a little bit on that when we talk about the adoption process that we went through in Al-Futtaim. Just a little context of where we are. We've had a really strong transformational journey over the last 5 years in Al-Futtaim. We've moved from ECC6, SAP, we're an SAP house. We've moved from ECC6 to S4HANA. Quite a significant move. We've moved all of our applications onto the cloud. When I took on the role, but the nature of our business meant that we'd moved through and we had 13 different POS solutions across the world because we just acquired and never upgraded and standardized those solutions. And of course, you can imagine that drove massive incremental costs as well, because every other secondary solution that we needed to integrate with POS, we had to integrate 13 times over. We've also taken some very significant decisions. The first one was to deploy what we've called an IDP, an intelligent data platform. And that, again, is going to be critical in the conversation we're going to have. Rather than having disparate data all over the place, we've made sure that all our data sits in one position. And it's driven a very interesting thing, which I call the democratization of data in our business. It's allowed people who've never really played with data before to suddenly have access to stuff that they've never seen. And I think, again, that's critical in terms of driving the ROI. For some of the stuff that we'll talk about. And we've also been very, very prolific in what we've done on agentic AI. We were hugely proud that we were the first organization in the Middle East to appoint a chief AI officer, and actually not just appoint a chief AI officer, but also a young lady who took that on, a lady called Al-Futtaim. She was here last year. We had a big product launch. It was quite exciting, actually, to be a retailer coming and doing a product launch, and turning the tables a little bit to do that. And that was an agentic AI model that drove the ability to cut across all of our e-commerce platforms where people could use a LLM to drive product selection in an app, which is linked directly to our loyalty program, which is called Blue Rewards. Anyway, Prashant, that was last year. And here we are this year, and a lot's moved on in the last year. So that's a little overview of who we are and why I'm here on the stage.
So it's an incredible journey that Al-Futtaim is on, and we're honored to be part of that journey. I think one of the questions that everyone has is, hey, we talk about complex global implementations. You have 14 countries. You have multiple brands. How do you start? What did you do? How did you guys think about it? How do you approach this?
Yeah, good question. And as ever, these things come out of, probably scenarios that you weren't expecting. Where all of this started for us was we had a request because we realized that we wanted to grow our food business. Now, typically, M&S Food for Al-Futtaim had been equivalent to some of the smaller retail environments. Those of you in the UK will know the format Simply Food, which is a pure M&S model that is typically run in gas stations and airports and so on. And we were much more akin to that. In fact, food was almost a secondary to the clothing offering. I think there was a realization that we were missing a trick. I mean, the M&S quality of food, the food provenance that they drive, absolutely fantastic. So we really wanted to drive onto the bandwagon of that. And I know M&S UK were obviously very keen that we did that as well. That meant we had to think about putting in an end-to-end food process. And in fact, that was the request that I had from the M&S business. We need an end-to-end food process system. Now, I just looked at them and said, do you even know what that means, right? Because it could mean anything from the manufacturer, from the supply, from the pricing, from the inventory. And I think we need to be really clear as we go into this in terms of our strategic objection. And here is my first lesson around AI that I think I've learned, which is, you need to be really clear on the strategic objective that you're trying to do. Yeah, we can try and do lots of clever stuff, but actually if there isn't a business imperative to do it, that the business really get behind it. And forgive me if I use the terminology business versus IT. It sounds very them and us, and I don't see the world like that, but I think it's important that you have slightly different agendas. If you go down that route and you are just deploying AI for the sake of AI, it's a very dangerous game, I think, and you won't get the business sponsors ultimately behind it. And I know we'll come on to that in a second. So we actually went out to market and went to a few players, and we had some very, very good conversations. And, one of the things that I think, if I may say, Prashant, made you guys stand up was you said, look, don't just dive in and do an RFP and we can have commercial conversations. Let's think about the process mapping. Let's make sure that we are absolutely clear on what the processes are as an as-is and where you want to get to as a to-be. And look, we all know, right? All of our merchandisers are in store. You have documented SOPs that we sit there, in the upper echelons going, great, yeah, we have our SOPs documented. The reality of what happens in the office or on the store is usually very, very different. And if you go into the journey where you're making assumptions on what the processes are rather than what they actually are, then as you start to drive the dynamics in terms of some of the clever analytics that we want to put in, you're going to make some big misses. And that's what really stood out, I think, was let's start with the process. Let's think about how we make that happen. Once we understand where we need more automation, where we can really drive greater efficiencies, then we can start on the journey and think about the actual data outputs that will come from it. And that's where the journey started.
That was incredibly important. When we started working with Al-Futtaim and M&S, it wasn't just the GCC. It was Hong Kong. It was Singapore, Malaysia. It was literally half of the world, from Saudi Arabia all the way to Hong Kong. I think one of the things that stood out was, as you're saying, we see this across retail. There's often an IT and a business divide. But you actually got the business very much on side, and you got the leader on side. How did he help, and how did you guys work together to get the rest of the businesses on side? Because you actually had very different business leaders in each of these countries.
Yeah. I'd like to say it was easy, but it wasn't, and I think there was a lot of kind of moments of realization as we went into it. I think it's very easy to get a little bit sucked into what you're doing in terms of the diagnostics, the tools, the machine learning models that you've got, the algorithms, which we can get really excited about if that's what you like. But at the end of the day, that's not what your average merchandiser is really interested in, right? They have targets. They need to meet their targets. They need to make sure that they're driven, whatever their KRAs are, which are all pretty classic for all of us, right? Reduce wastage, get rid of excess inventory, make sure that you have a good promotion strategy. How you drive that against the actual algorithmic model is kind of irrelevant, but we can get a bit sucked into that, right? And I think what we learned very quickly was let's stop talking about this as AI. And I have a bit of a thing here. I mean, I've missed the boat on this, so I'm afraid. I think artificial intelligence actually is not a terminology that helps us, right? Artificial has connotations of something that is made up and actually a little bit unpleasant. The terminology I like to use when I present this is let's talk about accelerated intelligence. Because what you're doing is you're taking people who've worked in retail for many, many years, who are very proud of what they've done, who think that they are getting it absolutely right. Of course they do. I mean, nobody really wants to turn up and do a bad job, right? And here we come as the IT guys and these special data scientists and say, you're getting it all wrong. And actually, you think you've been operating at 100%, 94%, 86% accuracy. And we bring out a model that shows that potentially that's only been 74% of where they could get to, right? So I think the way we started to engage with the business was stop talking about all of the sort of the data elements and just say, look, we're acknowledging that you guys are doing a good job, but we can really help you. And I think, the fact you talk about the weight loss drugs is in a really good example. How many buyers would have necessarily thought that it would have had the impact that it has had so quickly, right? And we all know, I've been in retail so many years that whenever the forecast didn't come in, we are, forgive me, but I've been there, so I'm allowed to say it. We come up with the best excuses in the world. Oh, the sales weren't there because it was sunny. It wasn't sunny. There was a ball game over the weekend. There was a ball game. This was the year that we did have the Olympics. No, we didn't have the Olympics, right? I've been there. I've done all those excuses. Yeah. But I think, we need to, this is a real opportunity to help particularly merchandisers and the buyers making those decisions to think about using technology, but not taking them out of the role. And, that was probably the most fundamental way, that once we got to that, they stopped being scared, they could see the outcome, they still challenged us like hell, right? But it allowed us to have a slightly different conversation at the C-suite.
I think that's really important. I think one of the things that Chris did well, we've seen this across the board, is everybody fixates on forecast accuracy. Everybody fixates on forecast accuracy and how accurate is a forecast. The problem often in retail is that we don't actually know what our forecast accuracy was. People know what the results were, but you haven't actually tracked the forecast to those results, at least in the merchandising space. Moving from that forecast accuracy to KRAs, hey, look, are our weeks of supplies going down? Is our lost sales going down? We can all agree that those are good things. that leads to bottom line improvement. They're probably going to be led because there is better forecast accuracy. So let's stop worrying about the forecast accuracy as much, but actually worry about the business outcome. How are we actually improving margin? If we improve margin, we're all going to win at the end of the day. What are some of the other things you would say to people that are starting off on this journey? Hey, I'm going off on this journey for the first time. Clearly, I think one of the things that you did, so I'm going to steal one of your answers here, is you kind of started with one country.
Yep.
We started with one country, the larger country in this complex chain, and that really helped because you see one success, and that then people like, oh, I want to do that as well. What are some other things that you would say would be important?
Yeah, although I think that was a double-edged sword, actually, because one of the things we did was we probably went with the most complex country where we had the most difficult dynamics. So I think my first one would be, prove the concept, right? I mean, it's so obvious, but it's always easy to be suckered into doing the POC that will potential for an area of the business that will have the largest ROI. And how many conversations do we have where we talk about the investment and it's like, yeah, but that's not going to give us enough. So let's go for a bigger market where there's more challenges. And I think particularly in this space where you're trying to drive the change management agenda, super important that you can really convince people. Keep it simple but make it work. My second comment would be prepared that you've got to go all in, right? There is no point in going down this journey and kind of being in the scenario where you switch off the laptop halfway through the reboot, right? We all know that's the worst thing to do. And the analogy that I used to try and convince the merchandisers, particularly around this, was it's a bit like driving with Waze, right? You either drive with Waze or you don't drive with Waze. You either use SatNav or you don't. And we've all done it, right? You kind of think you know better, so halfway through you go, that can't be right. The timing's just gone up by 15 minutes, and that's not the route I normally take, so I'm going to go back to my normal route. I'm sure we've all done it. And actually, then you realize why it told you to go another route, because you didn't know that 100K down the road, there was an accident, right? Now, we can assume, because of who we are, actually, I know better than that, that machine, right? And I think that's a really crucial point for us. And it's an analogy that worked really, really well in the business, just to get people to understand, saying, go with it, right? We'll make some mistakes. We know that. It's not going to be accurate. We know it's not going to be accurate because, hey, you've been doing that for 20 years in your career, and this little box of tricks has only been here for 5 minutes, right? So we acknowledge that. But take that opportunity to sort of make sure you're in it for the journey. We'll have the debates about where it doesn't look right, and and that's a very open conversation. And that leads me to my third point, which is particularly when you own these solutions, be humble about it as well, right? If we come in and go, yeah, this is brilliant, and actually, because the moment that it does go wrong, and you've stood there and convinced the entire C-suite that this is going to be completely accurate, 100% accurate, then you're on a hiding to nothing because the confidence in that solution has been lost overnight.
No, very fair. I'm going to flip just for a minute on pricing. Pricing is a topic in the U.S. that's top of mind. Tariffs are there. Inflation is there. You have rising interest rates or potentially lowering interest rates if the president gets his way over here. It's a topic that we, over the last 2 days, have seen a lot of people talk about. We, as a company, started with pricing and inventory. That's been the thrust since 2015. And pricing really is base pricing, promo, markdown, end of life for fashion. And then obviously for the food retailers is slightly different. You have your promotions that really drive everything, but also the base price that drives everything over there. When you think about pricing for such a complex organization, for Al-Futtaim, how do you now say, okay, where do I start?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And again, I think those of you who've worked in the expat market, and I can see a few of you in the room, will also know that the pricing in that, where it's bringing a brand from another country, and globalization has changed this, and I'll come on to that in a second, is another very important dynamic, right? Those of you who know the Dubai market will know that actually pricing was something that the objective of many of the buyers was actually to drive excess margin where you could, right? Because you could kind of get away with it. You had expats who wanted to buy M&S products, so therefore you could actually put, margin levels on there that really didn't match in the realistic world. So that's another really interesting dynamic. Now, I wouldn't say that, we had hyper margins, but, had margins that were probably higher than they should have been. But if you've been enjoying that, that is a really difficult drug to get off, right? And the moment you come in and say, we need to rebaseline our pricing, we're going to get closer to where we are with what's happening in the UK, in the M&S example, that's a tough call. But of course, it happened to us. Because as soon as you started to, certainly Dubai opened up, some of the restrictions of who could bring brands in changed dramatically. Then you've got, the e-commerce players who start to deliver. I mean, the e-commerce journey in Dubai is phenomenal in terms of the speed that that's driven. You've now got product that's being shipped directly from the source country for very, very, very small delivery costs, if anything at all, if you sign up to Amazon Prime and it's free international delivery. So customers can now do the direct comparison and understand that the cost of a jacket in the UK is X. The cost of the jacket that you're trying to sell in Dubai is now X plus, plus, plus. Where are they going to buy it from? They're not going to buy it from me. They're going to buy it from Amazon. So I think on the price, it's you've got the challenges here in the US market driven by external factors and obviously internal factors. The point of that is the complexity of that whole pricing environment requires something more than potentially one or two people can do. And I think that's where these engines start to come in and really drive that. To show if nothing else, just the sensitivity analysis between different potential routes that you would go down.
No, as we've done pricing, I think that's it right there. You're trying to help buyers, merchants, try to understand what is elasticity. Where do you have room to go? Where do you have room not to go? Promotions, what we've seen over the last 10 years is really driven by something, and everybody in retail knows this. It's Sally, same as last year. We are going to do the same promotion as last year because we need to comp last year, and if we don't do it, then we're not going to comp, so we're going to do it. But that's not necessarily good. We've trained our customers in a certain way, and now the market is saying, hey, look, it's changing. And it's an important thing for everybody to go back and look and understand what are the elasticities. The other thing about those elasticities is that they're constantly changing. The elasticity of today is not the elasticity of tomorrow. And that is where AI and ML really can help, because you're actually understanding those changing elasticities over there. I'm going to pause here and open it up for questions from the audience. You guys have been very kind to get up so early to be here with us. Are there questions from the audience? You can take my mic.
Thank you for this great talk. Is it working?
No.
It's fine. I'll repeat your question.
Sure. So thank you for that great talk. I really
He said, thank you for the great talk. I'd just like everybody to acknowledge that. Thank you.
We'll take that and repeat that bit, right?
the example that I'm taking away is that car navigation system. I will explain it to my team. You don't have to do anything halfway. You have to either in or out. Thank you for that example. My question is that when you're talking about the agentic AI, and then we have like merchants with 20 years experience, different people, different industry, different experience. What we are doing to make sure that all the tacit knowledge is being transferred to the agent, so that there would be exception that we as a human being know.
Take that. That's part of the change management challenge, right?
So the question was, with agentic AI, you have a lot of people going forward with it, but what do you take about the tacit knowledge that merchants have over the last 20 to 30 years and put that in the agent?
I think we've worked on two levels with that, and talking to the buyers, understanding what worked, what didn't work. The first thing is being very transparent about what you're doing with the data, right? I mean, I said don't get too hung up on the models and everything else, but at least you've got to explain why. And I was intrigued, even though they didn't want to get into the functionality. What they did want to know is why it was coming out with the solutions that it did, right? Because they wanted to at least process that and understand that against what decisions they would have already made, yeah? Also, I think really important, make sure that you understand in the different product categories as you go through the category management, what are the external factors that they are thinking about? What are the ways that they have done their pricing before? You can't just chuck that out of the door, but if you make that a very collaborative conversation at the outset and really work together, then that starts to drive it. And it comes back to my little bit about the accelerated intelligence. We're not saying all your years of experience is irrelevant, right? What we're saying is you now have so many other pressures to think about. Why don't you use something that helps you? And I guess it's no different to some of the other uses of agentic AI in other areas. If you just think about, Copilot, right? You might have resisted it for a while, but actually when you realize that it can make your life a lot easier and can start to summarize your schedule for the day. Of course, I know what my schedule for the day is, right? So I think that's the way. You just need to kind of, certainly for us, it worked really well to try and think about the way you drive some allegories that people could work with.
Right. That was actually a great question, because one of the things that we've been doing as a company as well, building on what Chris is saying, is we've been on the agentic AI journey for the last 2 years, right? 2.5 years. Last year, our booth had a big thing around agentic AI, Gen AI, and people are like, what is this, right? ChatGPT was not necessarily common day. I think most of us have at least tried it, and many of us probably use it every day. What we've seen just in the last 12 months as we put agents in each one of our products is that it's a journey. But the interesting thing about agents in deterministic workflows for B2B products is that with ChatGPT, and they'll say it to you, here's answer 1, here's answer 2. Which one do you like better? That's not something you can say to your inventory team. Hey, here's answer 1, here's answer 2. Which one do you like better? It's looking for you to give the answer. It's also making sure that you get the same answer. And I see Justin again, that Justin gets the same answer as Maggie, as the same answer as Carlos. It's very different with ChatGPT today. Maggie, Carlos, and Justin could get different answers in terms of, hey, what's the best flight? And it's kind of okay. It's not okay when you're doing inventory management or pricing. What we've done as a company is build the back-end infrastructure, the data scheme, the data framework, the data graphs, to actually make sure that we all are getting the same answer over there. We've built the first, what we believe is the first small language model for retail, where it's actually understanding retail-specific cues and retail-specific knowledge to give you the right answer. And you did help me in one thing, and these are our agentic use cases within Inventory Smart that are going to be available this quarter. Some are already available, and then some over the next 2 quarters, where you're actually helping your merchants do things that they used to do that took them days, maybe a week or so, actually very quickly, freeing them to think strategically over there. I'm going to keep going here for a second here. We had a demo on this. Oh, look, I actually missed that. We have a demo on agentic AI for inventory, so if you're interested, you can come up. I will just actually point out one other thing here. Does anybody know what this is? Oh, you have one. Wow, that's actually pretty cool. Do you want to explain how you use it or what you do with it? So, somebody yesterday guessed it's a translator. It's not a translator. It's a pocket. It's a pocket thing. And actually, you put it on the back of your phone, and it records your life. It records your life. And it's interesting because it's probably not good for a husband and wife to actually be able to go back to every argument they've ever had. And did you say this? But that's what this could do. Coming back to your question, if you have this, you actually can understand what are all the quote unquote nuances that a merchant has or the system has. This same thing is what we're trying to do for agentic AI in our systems, right? Make sure that we understand everything that everybody is doing. So when Carlos does something and then Justin does something and Maggie in the system, it's building that knowledge. It's building that institutional nuanced knowledge so it's out there. I only mention this because if you come to our booth and it's 4257 and we have a demo with you, we're actually happy to give everyone in your team one of these, a demo at your office, just to be clear. A demo at your office, we're actually happy to give one of these to your team. I'm going to flip it over here. Any other questions from the audience? Chris, I'll flip it back to you because you've now actually worked literally across the world. And one of the things there is you're seeing in England, in the US, and in the GCC. What is the appetite over the last 2 to 3 years to take on AI solutions? I'll say specifically in inventory and pricing, but generally as you're talking to people, how are people reacting to it now?
I think there are two elements there. I mean, we've all seen the bandwagon of AI happening, and we've all seen those curves showing how dramatic the development of AI has been. We've seen it in, the production of chips and stock market of NVIDIA, the stock price of NVIDIA, and so on. There's also a lot of fairy tales here. I mean, it struck me 3 or 4 years ago, and apologies if I'll be honest, when AI started to happen, you see a lot of signs on companies' booths here in NRF that would say, AI, but it wasn't really AI at all, right? And I think we're now really starting to see what it really is, yeah? As consumers get more used to it, I mean, if you have a phone, it's now built into your phone. You kind of have no option whether you use it or not, even if you understand what it is. And as people get more comfortable with that, there is a demand and an expectation in the business world that, well, we should be doing that as well, right? So I think the demand is definitely there. But I go back to what I said at the beginning, Prashant. Make sure that you are clear at the business strategies that you want to change from your AI journey rather than just doing AI for AI's sake. Because if for some reason it doesn't work, then you will have the problem of trying to go back and reconvince everybody. The faith gets lost. And, we've all done it, right? We've all done the ChatGPT prompt, and it's given us a completely nonsensical answer, and shown us a map with a capital city in completely the wrong place. I bet if that's happened, and it will have happened to you, that's actually stopped you from then using ChatGPT for a couple of days, right? And then you get back on it and, it gets better, right? And that I think is the challenge in that space. Let's use it. There is demand, but also people are still skeptical about it. It needs to be demystified, but it needs to be driving business value.
One thing you've been very good at also is we're talking about adoption at all levels, but also at the senior level. You've been showing the ROI. How have you made sure that the leadership across the board has stayed focused and then supportive of the AI initiatives?
As ever, it's kind of push and pull, right? So in Al-Futtaim, I've got a couple of my colleagues here, they would tell us, we can't get away from AI, right? AI is the language that we use every day, whether that's because we were an early adopter of Copilot, 3 or 4 years ago when it first came out. We were very lucky to be a lead partner. Microsoft gave us some opportunity to play with it early. Our priorities as an organization, number one priority is to leverage AI to drive a better business. Number one priority. Our strategic sales conferences are now AI conferences. We had a big AI symposium just 4 months ago. It is the language of our business. And, everybody is seeing that it comes straight from Mr. Omar Al-Futtaim, our vice chairman, right the way through the organization. And, it's the case, right? If leadership adopt it, then other people will follow and want to play with it.
I think that's an important piece right there, is that Chris has been instrumental in making sure leadership, which is clearly driving it at Al-Futtaim, is very interested in making sure that AI succeeds. But that's at one level, and then also driving change at each business unit level and with each user at the end of the day. What we're seeing very much right now is that the C-suite, the boards are saying, hey, what are you doing around AI? What are you doing around agentic AI? And that's driving a lot of conversations for us as a company. It's actually then saying, okay, the C-suite wants it. C-suite doesn't necessarily always, they say, okay, you do this, but what does it actually mean? It's actually taking that and saying, okay, as Chris did, here are some tactical wins that we can do as a company. I think inventory and pricing are huge areas where you can actually get in and do agentic AI, do AI, and actually drive value in 26. The thing about agentic AI and AI for any of us is actually showing that ROI. And these are two great areas in 2026 where you can actually show value across the board. I'm going to thank you, Chris, for a great session. As our gentleman here said, Thank you very much. If you guys have any questions, we're both around for a little bit. Thank you all. Have a great conference.
Thank you.